Hello everyone and welcome to Purple Rose Crafts. Today we're talking about creating a farmhouse dishcloth from our cotton yarn. Today we're using the Bernat Handicrafter cotton in the stripey, and the color is called Beach House. So it's this lovely purples and pinks and red and white included there. So what we've got here is about 3 ounces or 85 grams of yarn. It's more than we're going to need. It's probably going to make 2 or 3 cloths. It's a weight of 4, and it's using a 4.5 millimeter set of knitting needles to create this beautiful stripy pattern like it's going to show here on our diagram. All right. And as you all know, I like to pull my yarn out of the center of the ball to prevent it from rolling around as we're knitting later. So we're just starting here with our slip knot. We're going to insert our knitting needle. Of course, this is our 4.5 millimeter. It's a very long needle, but what I'm using is a set of knitting needles from a grandparent that can't knit anymore. So I am using old kind of heirloom knitting supplies here, so which I love because they never go bad. It's such a lovely way, because that's likely, if you have some of these knitting needles, it's likely that one of your grandparents actually taught you how to knit or crochet. So it's so much fun. All right, so we're starting it with casting on 4. So here we have, I've done 2, 3, and 4. All right, and from here we're going to start with going back across our row. All right, and so this is how we do our an increase row. Basically, this is a diagonal square dishcloth. So we're going to start here in the corner, and then we're going to go across to the other corner. All right, so we insert our yarn to go back to do a regular knit stitch. And then we do a second knit stitch. And then from here, we're actually going to do a yarn over to do our increase. So what we're going to do is bring our yarn to the front, and then we're going to continue knitting normally. So our yarn is going to go over the top and then around the back to add the increase. And then we bring it back through normal, just like we've been doing the rest of the row, and then we finish off our row here. So what we're looking at here is now 5 stitches, and what we have is going to actually turn into a little hole in our knitting. So there's our little hole there. All right, so we switch back, and the dishcloth itself is actually knitted in a garter stitch. So that's just straight knitting all the way across all of the rows. Of course, we're doing increases and then decreases, but it is just straight knitting. There's no purling or any other fanciness except for a couple of double knit 2 togethers later on. Okay, so now we're going to continue. We're going to do 2 knit stitches. Then we're going to yarn over and then knit the rest of the row. And that's it, nice and simple. We continue doing that until we have about 45 stitches on our needles, and then we start our decrease rows. So I'll come back in just a moment when we're starting our decreases. All right, so here we are, we're back with our dishcloth. When I was working on the pattern, I got to the 45 stitches and it was just too small. I measured it, it was only about, I don't know, 8.5 inches or so wide. And so I didn't like that it was so. So what I actually did was I ended up adding in about 10 more rows. So I have about 55 stitches on my needle now. It does get me closer to the 9 inches that I was looking for my dishcloth. So for now, we've gotten our side length here, and that's our 9 inches approximately, pretty close to it. And so now we're going to start our decreased rows. If you notice on my cloth here, what's actually happened is I have this little kind of fuzzy area. What happened was the yarn coming out of the ball had a little knot in it, so I guess it had finished off a section of yarn when they were making it, and they just knot it together and then keep on going with the ball of yarn. So no big deal there. We'll just end up tying it in or tucking it in, and we won't ever actually see it. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about our decreased rows. So what we have here actually is this is what happens with our yarn over. So this is all of our increased rows that we did at the beginning of each row. So you do 2 knit stitches and then a yarn over, and then we knit the rest of the row. So that's how we get our increasing of our pattern. Now, in this case, we're going to actually start decreasing, but we want it to continue looking like this pattern that we're doing. So we need to continue adding our stitch that gives us our hole, so our yarn over. And from that point, so it's actually going to turn into knitting 2 together twice to get to give us the hole, but then also decrease 1 stitch on each row. All right, so we're going to start with our 1. We're going to start by knitting 1, and then now we're going to knit 2 together. So in this case, we're going to knit what used to be the yarn over from 2 rows back, and our second knit stitch to create exactly what we're doing. So we're going to insert our hook, our needles, the same way that we insert 4 knit stitch, except now we're going to catch 2 strands instead of just 1. So I'll kind of zoom in here. If you can see, there's 2 stitches on my needle here, and we're through the back as if we were just knitting with 1 stitch. Okay, so now we yarn over and pull it back through as if we were knitting. Now we've got 2 stitches, and we just loop the 2 stitches off of our needle and continue on. All right, so now that we have 2 stitches on our right needle, we need to do our yarn over. So we're going to put our yarn to the front, and then now is where we're actually going to do our decrease. So we're going to do a knit 2 together again. So we're going to go into the back the same way we would knit with 1 again, and this time it's with 2. So in this case, our yarn's in the front, we need to come over to the back and then wrap it around as if we were knitting with just 1 stitch. All right, and then that's it for our decrease, and we're just going to continue knitting the rest of the row normally. And I'm just going to take a moment here just to show you sort of exactly what's happening with our pattern before we continue on too much. So I'm going to spread these stitches out. Okay, so what's happening is you notice that during our knitting, we're not actually going to create the hole on the back side of the work. What we're actually doing is we're going to, because we're doing it at the beginning of each row, it actually makes this nice like twist through the yarn over. So it actually knits in on the second row back, and we can add the yarn over hole on both sides of the work by only adding it at the beginning of each row. And so we're going to continue knitting across our rows on our decreased rows, and we're just going to continue in this fashion with every beginning row with a knit 2 together, and then a yarn over, and then a knit 2 together again, as it is in the pattern that I've posted below in the description. And then we just knit the rest of the row all the way across. And then at the beginning of the next row, sorry, I caught an extra strand from the row below. We're going to continue all the way across to the end of the row, and then when we turn it around, we're going to do exactly the same thing on the row coming back this way. All right, so that's our dishcloth. And once we get down to the 4 rows or 4 stitches on our needles at the end, that's when we start our cast on row. So I will come back and show you once we get to that point. And we're ready to, we've done all of our decrease rows here, And now we're down to just our last 4 stitches on the left-hand needle, our 4.5 millimeter needle. So now we're going to do our cast off row. So in order to do this, we're going to insert our needle into the first stitch knitwise, the same way that we would for a regular knit stitch. We're going to yarn over and knit it as if we were just starting another row. Now we're going to do the second stitch the same, so knit it as well. And then here we're going to lift our first stitch up and over and off of our right hand needle. So it's going to get tied up with the second stitch here. So now we're going to do our knit our third one, yarn over. So now we have 2 again. So our second stitch is going to go up and over. All right, and then we'll knit our last one. And now we will lift our last stitch up and over, and that's it. So now we can take our hook out, our needles out, and we're going to cut the thread or the yarn here, and then we're going to begin weaving in our ends. All right, so what I've done is I've just cut the 2 strands here, and now we're just going to take the one off of our yarn here and pull it out. So now we've got a little knot at the end, nice and tight, and now it actually looks like kind of a point at the end of the cloth. So we're going to take our knitting needles and set them aside, and now I've actually just gathered a little crochet hook. It's a 3 millimeter bamboo hook, and now we're going to go and weave in our ends. So what we want to do is weave it so that we can't see these see this yarn that we're using. So I tend to, when I start weaving, I tend to keep my colors together so that way you don't actually see it going into any other section. So I'm going to start by inserting my crochet hook underneath one of the stitches, catch my yarn with it, and then just draw it back through. And some people like to do this with a little bit of, a plan in place. I just am more about getting it finished, because weaving in ends for me is kind of my least favorite part of creating an item. So, all right, so we're gonna go underneath our knit stitch there, catch our yarn, pull it back through, and then now you can kind of see where the stitches go. So I've got this part of the stitch here. So we've got this part of the stitch here that we've gone underneath. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow that stitch with the yarn that I'm holding. So I'm going to follow this piece of yarn right here and head back under this stitch here, which is the next one over. So I'm going to catch my yarn there. This really is how you make it look seamless, because now you're never going to see it. It's going to be tied into other knit stitches. All right, so there's that. And then the stitch after that, it actually goes up into the top again. So we're gonna, I tend to turn my work as I need to insert my crochet hook. You can also do this with a darning needle, a large-eyed, basically yarn needle. It can help to kind of just be able to put it exactly where you want it to go, and then continue working. All right, so we would just continue weaving in this end until it was, maybe down to like an inch or half an inch. This tail is really long, so it doesn't quite need to be that long. You just want it to be basically tied in so that it's not going to come out, and your knitting's not going to unravel. So basically that's it for the tying in of the ends and casting off. And so that's going to be it for our dishcloth video. There we go. We've got a lovely striped cloth that looks like it needs to be, you know, blocked a little bit, which is more of like a stretching technique to make sure everything stays nice and square. But once we, you know, give it a wash and it's ready to give away, we're going to have this beautiful striped cloth that's going to just be lovely for washing dishes. Thank you for joining us with Purple Rose Crafts. If you like what we did today, click the like button below, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell so you'll be notified of future videos. Also, in the comment section below, tell me what more you'd like to see on the channel.